I've contributed all I can to this primary election, and it's clearly not my time, so I'm going to end my presidential campaign, continue my work as mayor of New York City, and I'm going to keep speaking up for working people.
Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jenna Flanagan. Tonight, a tale of two New York mayors who find themselves in the national spotlight and taking heat. We begin with the man who's now in charge, and it's all over for Mayor Bill de Blasio and his long-shot presidential bid. After months of poor polling, lackluster donations, and plenty of skeptical New Yorkers, the Democrat has called it quits on running for the nation's highest office. It hasn't been the warmest welcome home either, with de Blasio's chorus of critics ready to pounce and calling for him to get back to being a full-time mayor. Here with reaction and analysis are Dr. Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University and the co-host of FAQ NYC podcast, and the New York Times Metro Politics reporter, Jeffrey C. Mays. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
All right, so first off, I have to ask, what was your reaction? I mean, a lot of people feel like this was a long time coming. It was kind of obvious, but what were your initial thoughts when you heard Mayor Bill de Blasio out of the presidential race?
Well, when he said he contributed all he could contribute, my question was, what did you contribute to the conversation? He clearly wasn't the most progressive mayor. We saw him, or progressive candidate, on the stage. When he was on the stage, and there was a long, lengthy conversation about Eric Garner and policing, he was iced out of that conversation because he tried to punt to Joe Biden, and the candidates just had a conversation completely without him. So what was the point of your campaign when you have Bernie and Warren and Castro, honestly, more to the left of de Blasio? So now that he's coming back home, my question is, you've got 2 full years ahead. What's your agenda?
Yeah, I mean, the only surprise was that he did it on Morning Joe. When he did, I think people were expecting it to be closer to the deadline for the 4th Democratic debate. He kind of sprung it on people at 7 a.m. on Morning Joe and announced it. But it was clear from the get-go that he did not have the donors. He was not reaching the number of donors that he needed. He was failing to break 2% and in polls, still polling at 1% and 0% in most polls. So it was only a matter of time before it happened.
All right, so given the fact that most people were like, well, of course this happened, you never really had the momentum, I'm wondering what kind of a city is he coming back to? Because when Bill de Blasio got into the mayoral race, a lot of people were saying, what are you doing? You have so many things to focus on here in New York. So how did the two of you see his welcome back to New York?
You know, now that he's coming back, so we have lots of conversations. We have conversations about NYCHA, the SAT, and sort of larger educational programs, homelessness, which is getting more and more rampant. We've got, universal pre-K or 3K that hasn't really, 3K hasn't taken off, and universal pre-K is starting to show cracks in the foundation, some inequities with teachers and racial and demographic.
And he was touting that as one of his biggest programs.
And that is, and it's a huge program, and we've touted it. But now that the program is up and running, there are some cracks in the foundation that need to sort of be shored up so that this program continues beyond his legacy. And so there are a lot of issues in New York that need his attention. I mean, Jeff and I have talked about this over the past few years. When you're on vacation or when you're out of the office, you're still getting work done, but it's not at the same level and the same fervor as when you're in the office with everyone on a day-to-day basis. And he's been gone for several months, and now we need him to be at the table having these hard, nuanced conversations with some very smart people that he's employed, but they've just been running the city on their own without any full leadership.
And that's an excellent point with the people who've sort of taken over, if you will, the power vacuum. How does Mayor de Blasio now fit back into all of that at City Hall?
Well, it's going to be tough, I think, because what we're heading into is the 2021 election for mayor, and that changes the whole political calculus in the city. So he comes back and there's no shortage of items, as the professor said, that he can get done. There's school segregation issues that are going on, homelessness. He promised to build 90 new homeless shelters. They're behind on that.
Jails.
So jails, they're closing Rikers Island. How do you integrate those jails into the city neighborhoods? No shortage of issues. But what happens is that now when he moves on these issues, the people that he needs to cooperate, the city council, other politicians, are going to be working on their own agendas because, the 2021 election is going to be unprecedented. You know, most of the city council is going to be up for election. Most of the other major citywide offices are up for election. So they may not want to cooperate with the mayor's timeline.
And of
now
course,
that he's back.
we've already seen which members of the city council have already announced that they're going to be gunning for his position anyway.
Right.
So then what then becomes, is he now, I guess, a lame duck for these next 2 years, or does he get anything done?
Well, I think if he moves quickly, you know, there's still 2 years and maybe, another 6 or 8 months before the election season kicks off, in full swing. So he's going to have to move very quickly on those issues that are his priority. And if he doesn't move quickly, then he's going to be a real lame duck. But a lot of politicians I talk to think that he's damaged, and it's going to be difficult to convince people to do things he wants to do. The one thing he has in his favor is that the mayor of New York City has tremendous power. So there are lots of things he can do without the cooperation of his colleagues.
Well, I guess, and I'm not quite sure if this is really a good question to build off of his so-called tremendous power, because there is the big issue that the mayor has to deal with, and that is the NYPD. Of course, you mentioned earlier, Professor, that the issue of Eric Garner and how that was handled, and of course then Officer Pantaleo. How does the mayor begin to help drive this conversation? Again, this was something that he was on the national stage saying that he was going to be an advocate for, and here in the city, we are still struggling with how the NYPD does its policing, how it disciplines officers, how families are compensated when a tragedy occurs.
Well, I mean, we're in a low point right now for crime, but even when the NYPD has asked for additional police, de Blasio has given them more than what they've asked for, and they still don't necessarily see eye to eye. And so then that puts de Blasio in a really strange position, because on the one hand, so many communities elected him to sort of end stop and frisk and sort of decrease police presence in a neighborhood, and then he's actually sort of a proponent of adding police at different times to sort of cozy up to the NYPD, an organization, under Pat Lynch and the PBA, where they will never support this particular mayor. So he's ignoring his base, but also being ignored by a police department. And so that piece, as long as crime stays low, I think the citizens of New York will be happy. But when we sort of scratch the surface, there's still very specific communities that are living under the boot of the NYPD. And that's just not been something that's in the forefront of his concerns. At least he hasn't articulated as such. And as Jeff has said, we have a very limited amount of time. We've seen already that Corey Johnson's emerged as a figure who sort of speaks for the city. We're seeing that Scott Stringer is emerging as a figure who is speaking for the city. Pretty soon we'll probably see Ruben Diaz and Eric Adams sort of speaking on behalf of the city. And so once we're done with the 2020 election, for sure, that is when everything kicks into high gear, and no one's really going to care what this particular mayor has to say. I don't know if he's going to return, to work today, sort of eager, ready to hit the ground running and saying, in the next 2 years, whether I have the cameras on me or not, let's actually shore up pre-K and 3K. Let's get this homelessness crisis under control. Let's figure out the jails in the neighborhoods. Let's sort of figure out how we can work with the NYPD to make sure that Black and Latinx communities aren't oppressed. I mean, there's so many things, school segregation, so many things he could and should be doing. We don't know if it's going to be a whole bunch of YMCA in Brooklyn and, sort of ignoring the reporters in Room 9. We just don't know how it's going to play out.
Okay, actually, the reporters in Room 9 was my next question, because could possibly those announcements keep coming out on Morning Joe or some other national news network, when he seems to have a very he does have a prickly relationship with the local media here. Right. Do you see him turning that page, or just maintaining that's just what it is?
Well, I think what we saw this weekend when he immediately returned was, he took the train to the climate summit protests. He was this weekend at the Festival of San Gennaro, judging a meatball contest or something like that. Those are the sort of things that New Yorkers expect to see. Those are the sort of things that New York media writes about and covers. And I think if he has plans beyond when he finishes his role as mayor of New York City, if he wants to move on and do other things, he is going to have to have shore up his accomplishments here in the next 2 years. And there is no way that he can do that without broadcasting those successes. He's going to have to broadcast those successes. So I think something is going to have to shift in his relationship with the media. He's no longer a candidate. And so now he's back to mayor of New York City with his press corps here, which is impressive. It's a massive press corps that he has. He can broadcast his message at almost any moment. So there has to be some sort of shift if he expects to move beyond mayor of New York City into whatever role he'd like to do when he finishes his term.
But we don't really have a precedent of New York City mayors going on beyond the New York City mayor. I mean, Bloomberg's a billionaire, so he's a little different. Rudy Giuliani, not so much. He became America's mayor, but that's because of 9/11. But as far, he had a failed presidential bid. David Dinkins was a professor at SEPA. I mean, we can go on and on. I don't see him having a national presence in this.
Well, even if he wants to be the head of some sort of nonprofit, again, politically, I think there's not many options there. But, I think he needs to strengthen up his legacy right now. He has pre-K. That is the strongest part of his legacy. What else are we going to be talking about that he's accomplished in 8 years as mayor?
And of course, we're almost out of time, but the big issue that everybody constantly is concerned about is the MTA. Do you see the mayor perhaps repairing, working on fixing something, his relationship with the governor, because they still have to find a way to work together?
Right. I mean, I think so much time has been wasted between the two of them in their political jockeying, and it took de Blasio a very long time to understand that Andrew Cuomo has more money and more power and more understanding as to how New York City and New York State operate. Andrew Cuomo and Bloomberg were able to get along in a particular fashion because Andrew Cuomo also understands power and understands that the mayor of New York City was also a billionaire. And so the service, although it's controlled by the state, so many New Yorkers see it as a city entity and blame the mayor for, delays and sort of the dilapidated conditions.
Fare increases, yeah.
But, it's hard to articulate what you're doing when you're in Iowa at a state fair or in New Hampshire. So now that he's back, we'll see if he even wants to do the hard work of governance.
It doesn't look promising, I have to say. The MTA came out with their 5-year capital plan last week. The state, they're requiring the same amount of money from New York City, $3 billion, as the state is going to input. And that is a serious issue. The mayor has come out again and said, he hasn't read the plan yet. He needs to examine it. So the signs are not promising that there's going to be any change in that relationship between the governor and the mayor. And certainly last time when the state asked the city to kick in more money, the state was able to force the city to put in more money to fund the MTA.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. There's a lot to look forward to. Hopefully, we see some sort of changes on the horizon coming out of City Hall. But I want to thank you both for joining us and giving us your well-informed insight.
Thank you.